Let me make sure. Okay, so I think the recording has started. So we're going to go through a PowerPoint presentation. Like I said, Andy will kind of chime in as he thinks of things that kind of relate to what we're doing, and then Chastity and Jenna, if you have anything that you feel is important for them to know, really the ultimate goal is to help you understand how TSA can be co-curricular in your program, almost to the point where some schools TSA is really now intracurricular, where they're embedding the competitions into classes directly as projects, and then having local competitions to see who advances to regional and then state and then national competitions. So give me 1 second to share my screen. I'm also going to kill my camera. Andy, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Like I said, if there's something that you're curious about, throw it into the chat, and then we'll stop every once in a while and answer questions. I can't right now see the chat at all, so Chastity and Jenna and Andy are going to kind of monitor that and interrupt me as needed. So just quickly to give you kind of a brief overview of what TSA is. It stands for the Technology Student Association. We are a state affiliate of the national organization. And it's really the most closely aligned career and technical student organization, or CTSO, to the STEM career pathways. So we primarily focus on media arts, IT, computer science, engineering, aviation, and pathways that kind of fall within those program areas. It's obviously supported a lot by educators. Without our teachers and our chapter advisors, TSA would not exist. They really do all of the legwork in their local chapters, but also help coordinate, judge, pretty much voluntold and volunteer to do pretty much anything that we ask, and we truly appreciate their support. Really, the bread and butter of TSA are our competitive events and our leadership opportunities that are embedded as well. So just to give you an idea, the mission statement you can see on your screen, I'm not going to read that to you. And then our motto is helping students to learn to lead in a technical world. They actually changed the motto several years ago. It was just learning to live. But we really want students to understand that they can become leaders in the technical world as they move on through post-secondary and go into the workforce. Our chapters, like I said, are really they're the lifeblood of TSA. And that's kind of why you're here today, to learn kind of what it takes to put a chapter together. It's not an easy lift, but we're going to give you kind of tips and tricks on ways that you can implement a chapter without exhausting yourself. There's a lot to TSA. If you're familiar with other CTSOs such as Skills USA or FBLA or FFA, there's a lot of work that needs to go into them to make them successful. But like I said, our goal today is to kind of help you understand ways that you can incorporate this in without killing yourself. Yeah, we are very service oriented as well. So the national office does every year, their service project is for the American Cancer Society. Our service project at the state level is chosen by the state officer team. So this year was obviously very interesting with our state conference being canceled, but we did an electronic ballot. Our candidates for state office created YouTube videos. We posted the YouTube video link as well as their letter of recommendation from their administrator, and then our voting delegates made decisions, cast their votes based on what they saw in the video and also the letter of recommendation. Not an ideal way of voting, but given the situation, it was the best way. And we're actually swearing in our state officer team this evening on a call. So our existing team will be on that call. swearing in the 2021 state officer team that will take the reins. So they are the ones that decide what the state service project is. This past year was Special Olympics. The year before was Ronald McDonald House. No, that was 2 years ago. Last year was the International Book Project. And so we want students to understand that the competitions are fun, the social event and the meetings and everything that goes along with conference is great. But there's a lot more to it, and we want them to understand that giving back to their community is very important as well. Nationally, we have over 250,000 high school and middle school students. So TSA starts in 6th grade and progresses all the way through 12th grade. Nationally, 2,500 teachers are involved, and that's a really good network of teachers, not only for TSA, but they're also like-minded teachers teaching similar content to what you teach as well. In Kentucky specifically, we kind of plateaued membership-wise for a long time. We've started encouraging schools and helping schools understand how to implement TSA over the past couple of years, and you can see our membership is really on the rise because of that. Especially thanks in part to advisors like Chastity and Jenna, who reach out to the neighboring school or their middle school feeder program, because they understand that if they can get their middle school feeder to understand TSA, when the kids come to them, it's not, here's what TSA is. It's, hey, you've already done this 3 years, let's hit the ground running. So we're excited about our membership growth. We still have a long way to go to reach all the STEM students in Kentucky. We're working as hard as we can to get schools to understand the importance and how CTSOs are kind of a crucial piece to CTE programs. Active chapters, you can see we have 3 regions. So you can see the east over there is in blue. So if you live in one of those counties, you would go to Morehead State for your regional. Any of the red circle stars there are middle school chapters. Some of them are hiding underneath blue ones just because it gets kind of cluttered in some areas. The blue ones are high school programs. The gray counties, if you're in the bluegrass region, all the way from Cincinnati down to the Nashville area, those are our central region. They go to EKU for regionals. And then west, you can see in red, Murray State hosts the regional event, and it's tied along with their engineering day, their E-Day that they host there every year. State conference is held in Lexington, or was supposed to be held in Lexington this year. We moved it from Louisville. Never really got the chance to see what it looks like in Lexington yet, but hopefully next year we'll be able to try that out. To give you just kind of a synopsis of what happened last year at National Conference. So last year was at the Gaylord National Harbor in Washington, D.C. was where Nationals was held, and they move it every year from state to state, city to city, which is pretty fun for students to really experience, different cities and different areas of the country as part of being in TSA. Last year we had 10 schools attend. We had several middle school students placed in the top 10, so we're talking top 10 nationally. Is a pretty big deal. High school, we even had a student place 4th in CAD architecture, and that's one of those events that has several hundred students competing in. So to come in 4th is pretty impressive, and then 10th in video game design at the high school level too is very impressive. So those students really went from through regionals, through state, and putting in a lot of time and effort to place in the top 10 at the national competition.
And we're talking about over 8,000 people that were there.
Yeah. Anywhere between 8,000 and 9,000, depending on the city. Sometimes they've seen it almost up to 10,000 students at the national conference. So, very impressive. And then also at the nationals, if you're familiar with teams, teams is a competition, kind of a problem-solving competition, as well as some academic components. Owensboro Innovation Academy placed 4th at the national conference. And then our chapter advisors of the year get recognized. So we had Zach Thomas out of Lyon County, who was instrumental in getting the West region kind of structured, and he was the regional coordinator the past couple of years. and then James Pennington Raceland, TSA, was our middle school advisor. They also do what's called the Technology Honor Society, and we had a student inducted into that last year, which is exciting. And then Grant County Middle School last year was part of the Circle Plus, or the 300 Plus Circle Club, which means they had over 300 members in TSA just in their middle school. What we see a lot of times in middle schools, but also at high schools, is teachers find it easier if any student that has access to their program, they just enroll them in TSA. And we'll talk about the dues structure here in a minute, but it's actually cheaper the more students that you put into the system per student, if you think about it that way. So Grant County, basically every student that comes through their STEM elective wheel, or their elective wheel that they have, where they're spending 9 weeks with their STEM teachers, they enroll them in TSA. And that way, if a student, if they don't see that student until the second 9 weeks, they go ahead and put them in the system. And that way, when the student shows up, in October into their program, and says they're interested in TSA, there's nothing really that those teachers have to do. So we encourage schools, obviously, to blue cap, which is unlimited enrollment for one fee for the dues. It just makes things easier, and it gives every student an opportunity. And I can speak to, and maybe Chastity and Jenna could probably speak to this as well, but when I was a chapter advisor, I taught engineering at Franklin County Career and Tech Center. I would have students in February, I'd post regional conference coming up, come see me, and they'd say, oh, I want to do that. And, they never came to me in October when we had call out for a club, but they decided in February that they wanted to do the CAD engineering competition, for example. So then you kind of scramble to put them in the system and get them registered. And Jenna or Chastity, do you have anything to add to that?
I've had that a lot of times that nobody responds or whatever, and so I think you told me that, Mark, my first year, just to put everybody in from the beginning, and then they're in there ready to go. If they don't, it doesn't really hurt anything.
Right. Yep. And Chastity and Jenna, am I missing anything in the chat before I move on?
Nope, you're good.
Okay. So this year, National Conference was supposed to be at the Gaylord Opryland in Nashville. So it would have been a very easy commute, but they have decided, unfortunately, to cancel National Conference due to our current situation. Next year, if everything goes as planned, we will be in Orlando. And if you've not been to this Rajan Shingle Creek Resort, the nice thing about what TSA tries to do most times is host in kind of an all-inclusive conference center / hotel. So you're not, so they do have to have overflow hotels sometimes. Like this one will have an overflow if it sells out the main hotel. But it's nice that students just walk down the hall and compete, and then go get their swimsuits on and go swimming after they're done. And it saves a lot of that stress of trying to get places. That really depends on where they host. I can tell you in 2023, TSA Nationals will be in Louisville, Kentucky. So we're very excited that it will be here. It has not been in Louisville since, Andy, help me out with the history, 97, maybe?
96.
96. So we're very excited. It kind of puts Kentucky back on the map as far as TSA goes. That will be at the Convention Center downtown Louisville. So students will be able to go to, experience 4th Street and the Louisville Slugger Museum and factory and everything that the downtown Louisville has to offer. So that's a ways off, but still exciting to think about. We are working with the Gaylord Marriott, or the Marriott Griffin Gate, sorry, which is where we were going to host state conference this year, working with them on dates for next year's state conference. So we'll send those out to you once we know. It's looking like mid-April, similar to what it was supposed to be this year. But we're excited about working with Marriott and what they have to offer, kind of giving the whole conference a new look and new feel. They just renovated multi-million dollars, all their meeting room space. So everything's, new paint, new carpet, new furniture. So we're really excited about working with them and moving the conference there for 2021. I mentioned the state officer team. So this team was determined, like I said, by voting delegates, just like it would have been at state conference, just in a strange way of doing it all electronically and kind of an in-person personal feel. But we do have students representing all 3 regions, which we're excited about. Chastity has 2 Grant County high school students one is Phoenix, who's going to be the reporter, and then Madison. They'll both be sworn in tonight on our online call with the existing officer team. Chastity, can you speak a little bit about what it's like getting students ready to run for office?
Yeah. With these girls, we talked about it for probably about a year. Like they were both in middle school TSA, and then they kind of watched the state officer team that year. And then as they were freshmen, one was a freshman this year, one was a sophomore. They kind of talked about it. They were officers in our our chapter at school, and have been able to kind of grow it. And they both really want to take on a leadership role. They were excited about the idea of trying to make a bigger impact on more people than just our school. And so both the girls kind of took on that idea that they wanted to do it, and I just kind of supported them along the way. They wrote their resumes. They had to get a recommendation letter from their principal. We worked on their videos this time, because normally we'd work on their speeches. And honestly, most of the girls, they did it a lot on their own. And so I just they would feed me back what they got, and I'd give them a little bit of feedback, and then they would turn it into marks. So it's actually pretty easy to get a state officer if your kids really want to do it, if they're engaged and they're excited about it. Both of them were very enthusiastic, so it was easy for me, at least.
Yeah, well, and then Andy and I really try to make things easier on the chapter advisors. We understand, both being teachers at one point, understand how chaotic schools can be. So we try to make forms easy to navigate. A lot of it can be put directly on the students, so that the chapter advisor is just kind of the mediator, but not doing a lot of the work. And then we also have regional officers. So each region has their own officer team. And then national officers also. We actually have a student this year that's planning on running for their national office, and that'll be interesting to see how they run the national election without having a conference. But we're excited about her and her candidacy coming up. So let's talk about competitions. And there's really, if I had to put competitions into 2 buckets, one would be, one bucket would be the students spend a lot of time at school prepping for competition, and then they show up to conference and they present all the work that they've done. Let's take architecture modeling, for example. Students are going to spend time in a CAD software designing blueprints. Then they're going to build a foam core model of what the architecture model needs to look like to meet the competition theme. And then they bring all of that, their portfolio and their model, to conference, and they spend 10, 15 minutes in the room presenting and pitching it to the judges to show them what all they've accomplished. The other bucket is students don't really have to do much at school, but they spend 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 hours sometimes at conference actually solving a problem on site. So an example of that would be coding at the middle school and high school level. So the students are going to show up. They're going to be given different scenarios that they have to they have to code for, and then they're given 2 or 3 or 4 hours, depending on the level, middle school or high school, where they're sitting in a room actually coding, and then at the end they show the judges what they've accomplished. So there's really 2 main types. One, that they're doing a lot of work up front, and then they come to conference and present all of that work, or they do maybe some prep work as far as skill building at school, but when they get to conference, they're going to spend considerable time, actually
Performance.
working through. Andy, what were you saying?
Performance.
Yes, thank you. That's the word. So a performance bucket and a presentation bucket. Thanks, Andy, I should just stop talking. Yeah, so we really pride ourselves in having business and industry as judges. So we get the Lexington Chamber of Commerce involved. We get the State Chamber of Commerce. We get a lot of post-secondary professors involved, but we want these students to get feedback from people that are out in the field doing the work that these students are really working on. We want them to get constructive criticism as well as praise, especially if they plan on moving up to the national level. We want them to kind of learn their weaknesses here, so when they get to nationals, they have a really good chance of placing in that top 10. And then students are getting, depending on the region, they get certain maybe ribbons or medals or trophies. At the state, we do medals and plaques, and the plaques are really meant for teachers to hang on their wall, so they can kind of have a TSA wall of accomplishments in their classroom, or even in the hallways, even better, to kind of showcase what's going on inside that classroom. So there are over 60 middle school and high school events that come down from the national office. So they send, once you affiliate in the fall as a TSA chapter, you log into a system called Total TSA, and then it has the guidebook, which is 200, 300 plus pages that has every competition in it, along with the rubric, along with the coordinator's guide. So students not only understand what they need to do, they see the rubric so they know how they're going to be judged. And then you also see the coordinator guide, so you understand how the room's going to be set up and what the students need to bring on their own, and what the regional or state or national conference will provide. And it varies greatly from competition to competition. So it's really important for students to understand how to navigate that rule book. And, I always, as a TSA advisor, and I'm sure Chastity and Jenna could attest to this as well, but I just hammer rubric, because if students do a great job, but it doesn't match the rubric, they're gonna lose points, and all that work just kind of goes down the drain. Anything to add, Jenna or Chastity, on the event guide?
I think our joke between Chastity and I, because we also do VEX, is we love TSA because we can just focus on the rubric, and it's all about the rubric. So Chastity and I both are, we just joke around. We're like, that's why we can do TSA, because we focus on the rubric. And I mean, that's exactly right. I tell my kids, they have to check off on the rubric of all the different things. And that's usually the last thing, even though we preach it, that's like the last thing. Cause I'm like, I'm not looking at it until you show me where you've checked off on the rubric you are. And then they're like, oh, I forgot this. And then also the other thing that I think disqualifies kids sometimes is the list of things that are supposed to be in their portfolio. So they also have to show me that they did all the things that are supposed to be in the portfolio. And so, because that portfolio is like a go, no go. And so those are big things that I think it's important to pay attention to too, that sometimes disqualifies some really good projects because they didn't pay attention to everything that was like on that go and no go or the portfolio list.
I would agree with Jenna completely. Like, those are the things. Somebody asked a question in the chat about when they get the topic and of the competition and things like that. Exactly what Mark said. As soon as you affiliate, you get access to all of it. And so what I do with my kids is, one of our first meetings, I kind of tell them about what the different competitions are. And if they're interested in a competition, I go ahead and print out all of the information about that competition. And I have that on hand to be like, here's what you'd have to do for that competition. Here's kind of what the goals are. Here's what the topic is this year. And you can see some of the topics online ahead of time, but usually you've got to affiliate to really know exactly what Jenna's talking about with that rubric and those like specific details of like what goes in your portfolio. What do you have to make sure you're not going to get docked a lot of points or even get disqualified. So, but all that can come early. If you affiliate early, which Mark will highly encourage you to affiliate by no later than October, you will be able to get that into the kids' hands as soon as possible.
Yep. No, that's exactly right. Yeah, and Jenna brought up a good point about rubrics. And actually, I'll pull one up real quick so you can see what a rubric looks like. So on the rubric, the first thing you'll see is what's called go, no go. So these are pieces that if a student doesn't do, they are just DQ right on the spot. And a lot of times it's, do you have a portfolio? And it's just a yes or no. So let me pull up a high school guide here. We'll do, it doesn't really matter. Let's do board game design. It's a pretty neat competition for you to see. So this, just for board game design, it's an 8-page document you can see. So you get an overview, this eligibility is actually for nationals. So 1 team per chapter. So 1 team from your school can go on to nationals. And that varies greatly on how schools do that. Some schools say, well, if you didn't place first or second at state, we're not sending you on to nationals. But some of the competitions, we're only allowed to send 3 teams per state. Other competitions, like you can see here, we can actually send 1 team per chapter. So yeah, that's kind of on you. And I'd have a hard time if a kid didn't even place it at state, paying hundreds of dollars to get them to a national competition. But that's completely on the each individual advisor. So you'll see the time limits are in here, the attire, what they need to wear. LEAP is the leadership component. We're not going to talk about that today because I hear it's changing. So I don't want to confuse you and tell you something, and then in the fall it looks completely different.
Go back right there, Mark, at the bottom on the right column.
Yep.
Because Jenna was talking about not just having a portfolio, but the components that must be in a portfolio so they don't lose points. And you'll find those types of things under the regulations portion there that's in every event guide. And then if you go to the second page after that, it should have what's required in the portfolio for that event. So it's not just the rubric, but it's a rubric in combination with the regulations. So there, see over on the right side there at the top, it started table of contents,
Yep.
Overview of the game, all that right there is what is required to be in the portfolio. So each one of those will have a corresponding portion in the rubric. So it's a combination of looking at both portions there to make sure that they don't leave something out.
Yep. And this is kind of one of those that I was talking about. It's in the first bucket. They do a lot of work up front, and then they're going to come and present all of that work to the judges. So this one happens to have semifinalists. So and once again, this is national level. We do things a little bit different here just because we don't have hundreds of kids entering into this competition. So we usually
4 days.
Yeah, they have 4 days at nationals, and we have like a day and a half really at state. So you can see it. They even align the careers. So if students are interested in board game, you kind of think, how does board game relate to STEM? But you got to think about all those designers, engineers working on it, and manufacturing of it, and that sort of thing. And so here you can see the rubric. So the first thing Jenna mentioned is go, no go. So if a student shows up to competition and they don't have their portfolio on a USB, then they are just DQ'd from that. So it's pretty clear on the rubric. We do have students, unfortunately, that show up and don't bring their LEAP report, for example. You can see is one of the pieces. It's unfortunate, but we also, hold every student accountable for these rubrics. And then I, as an advisor, like Jenna said, once students could prove to me that they did all of this work, then I would be the judge in my classroom, and I would go through and look at their portfolio and make sure that they had an overview, they had an intended audience, they had their game instructions, and I would grade them, and I'd probably grade them harder than some judges, but I didn't want shoddy work leaving my classroom. But you can see this, this rubric is like 3 pages long, so it's very detailed on what the judges are going to be looking for. The judges use the exact same rubric you see here, which is, I think, a big advantage for sure. And then here's what the demonstration and interview looks like. So when they come into the room, they're going to, does the theme match? Does it make sense to what they're talking about? Is it age appropriate? Did they demonstrate how to play the game? Did they engage all the team members, or is it just one kid doing all the work? And then they're going to get a total, and then judges can write comments as well to give them some constructive criticism and praises down there at the bottom. And then, like I mentioned, here's the coordinator's instructions. So you as a teacher understand what materials are going to be provided. So if the students need to have an extension cord for some reason, maybe not for this competition, but for CAD, for example, when they're bringing a laptop in. But this helps you and the students understand even what the coordinators are going to be looking for, and it kind of gives them an edge if they really take the time to read through this. It kind of gives them an edge on what to expect, especially their first time. And then the competition themes are posted.
Mark, there's a couple of questions out in the chat. I don't know if you want to talk about them now or if you're going to do this later. I think we already talked about the topic well in advance. As soon as you pay your membership, you'll get that in September. They're wanting to know about the competition attire, which you're probably going to talk about a little bit later. And then a bookkeeping accounting question. They have an engineering account for course fees that they use to pay for supplies and such. Do you collect fees from students to participate in TSA starting out, or how do you raise money for the chapters? So do you want to wait and do that towards the end, or?
Yeah, several of those I'm going to address here
I thought so. Okay.
as we go through. If I forget one, Jenna, yell at me towards the end.
Okay. Sounds good.
So one thing that you'll notice, I keep mentioning like the competition theme. Those are not in the guidebook. Those are actually out on the website. You can see those now. If you go out to tsaweb.org and then just scroll down to themes and problems. If we go, let's stick to the theme of, I talked about architecture design earlier. So you can see right here is the design problem for architecture design. So every year the themes are going to change or at least shift slightly, so students can't just resubmit the exact same thing every year. So this is the problem design for architecture modeling, and it gives them everything that they need to understand and think about when they're doing their design to meet whatever the overall theme is for that competition. Some competitions don't have themes, like for example, Technology Bowl. It's kind of like Governor's Cup, Quick Recall. So it doesn't have a theme. The students are going to come in, take a test. If they're if they're one of the top performing teams on the test, then they move on to the Quick Recall. Yeah, so I've mentioned several of the competitions. There's, like I said, 30 plus at the middle school level and then 30 more plus at the high school level. That can be a little bit overwhelming because if you have, a team that wants to do animatronics and you don't know what the word animatronics means, that can be a little bit intimidating. I always recommend to teachers, your first year, maybe don't even tell the kids that 30 plus competitions exist. Maybe just pick the ones that align to the courses that you're offering. So if you're teaching computer science, maybe you go with the cybersecurity and the coding competition. Just because you have access to 30 plus competitions doesn't mean you have to let your students compete in all of them. Take bites at a time. Don't try to knock it all out at once. One thing nice that they've added, and when I send this to you, you'll be able to click on all these links. But if you go out to the national website, they've broken it down into cluster areas. So you can see there are 4 competitions that relate to architecture and construction tech, 4 that relate to communications, 5 that relate to leadership, computer science. These are the high school ones, and now my computer has frozen, of course. And that's similar at the middle school level too. So if you just go out to this website, you can see over here, and you only want to see the competitions that relate to STEM and the arts, you can click that link and it will just pull up the 8 competitions that relate specifically to that. And oh, there, finally it went. So yeah, once you go out to that website, you'll see here, if I'm only interested in the leadership competitions, for example, I can click on that. When I scroll down, it's going to list just the leadership. So we have chapter team, extemporaneous speech, future technology teacher, prepare presentation, and then tech bowl. So that can kind of help you understand, hey, I teach, manufacturing technology or manufacturing engineering. So I just want to focus my time on those competitions this year. You can break that down very easily. And same goes at the middle school level too. They do that. Same thing at the middle school level. So you can see here there are 3 that relate to architecture, communication, tech, computer science, and IT leadership. And then STEM, or technology and research, is a big one as well.
If I might add,
Yep.
many of the events from middle school to high school are sistered. In other words, they have a similar event in high school that the students compete in middle school. So if middle school students are feeding into your high school, then they can develop those skills and then take it to a higher level once they get into a high school chapter.
Yep. Yeah, exactly right. We developed 2 new, these are state only. So we developed 2 competitions this year with the help of our advisors. We worked with them to develop the rubrics. We did this with our executive committee as well. They had a big hand in this. So we developed a competition called Unmanned Aerial Systems. So we use DJI Tello drones that you can see down in this picture, bottom left. Students, there's 2 components to that. One, they have to manually pilot it, and do an inspection mission. So they're going through these buildings that are part of the obstacle course and taking pictures to show that they've inspected the buildings. And then we also have a programming component where they're doing an autonomous search and rescue mission through the same obstacle course. That one, unfortunately, we obviously didn't get to see at state, but we did it at 2 of our regions. It went very well. It was a very popular competition. And then PVC kayaks, you can see Jenna's iLead Academy kayak in the top. These are pretty much nothing but shrink wrap, duct tape, and PVC pipe. And then students have a portfolio that goes along with it that they have to turn in, and then there's a performance-based. So you can see in this picture, this is at EKU's pool and the race that we did there for regionals. Once again, didn't get to see it at state, but overwhelmingly positive with both of these competitions. We're excited about seeing these grow across the state next year. Jenna, Chastity, anything to add on our new competitions?
I did the kayaks with freshmen only, and I think it was really good. Like with their intro to engineering, they went through the design process and all that kind of stuff, and then we put the best 2 in. And I think it was definitely like a new, like, fun way to get freshmen involved. And all the older kids were kind of mad that I didn't let them do it. I only let the freshmen do it. And so that kind of, because I was having a hard time recruiting the freshmen this year. And so that really, when that came out, that was a huge one. And then my kids loved the drones, but we didn't get to come because of transportation issues on that. But and they didn't have much problem with the drones, and they really liked them. They liked that competition, getting ready for it too.
I will say too, like, the kids have been really excited about both of these events. But I didn't really know how to program the drone myself. And like, my kid just took off on his own, and he was like, this is awesome. I'm so excited. And he would stay after school every day for like 15, 20 minutes because he drove, and would just like practice in my room to see if he could get better at it. And then same thing kind of with the kayaks. Like, I just gave space and the kids worked, and I ordered what they needed. So like, they really took it on as a, very much their own project, and they were super pumped about them. And it was really fun to watch them as well.
Yeah, we stuck with the DJI Tellos, or the Tello EDUs, if you're familiar. One, because DJI is kind of a leader, and we wanted students to understand that, although these aren't industry grade drones, they are made by the same company that are making, kind of the leader in the drone industry right now. But they're also safe enough you can fly them indoors. So all of our competitions for that are indoors. So you don't have to worry about FAA regulations, or, does somebody have a remote pilot's license and that sort of thing. So we spent a lot of time trying to figure out that, and ultimately decided it's also very easy to program. And the EDUs actually have 3 different programming languages. So if you have students just starting out, they can do a Scratch-based program. But if you have students that want to go to that next level, they can actually program them in Python and Swift. So you can kind of scaffold what that looks like for sure. I want to touch on computer science because I know we have several IT and computer science teachers on the call. So TSA has put a lot of time and effort into upping their computer science game. And so they've aligned now to the ISTE standards, and they've also aligned the high school competitions to AP computer science standards as well. There are 8 competitions that are computer science and IT related. When I send this to you, you'll be able to click on these links over here and see a PDF that explains specifically what those competitions are. And so you'll be able to click that link later on, but we're getting, we only have about 15 minutes left on the call. I don't want to take too much time.
Well, they've also strengthened that strand by partnering with CompTIA this past year.
Yep, you're right. And I think I talk about that here in a minute in this, in the slide. So for students, obviously there's going to be a lot of leadership components to this, teamwork and problem solving. Like I said, the service project is important. That helps students understand that the world is bigger than their classroom and what's going on just locally. And then obviously even the networking opportunities they get with the judges and the post-secondary partners that set up at our college fair and that sort of thing. So there's a lot more to it than just the competitions for sure. And we let them have fun as well. So I mentioned co-curricular or even intracurricular. So a lot of people say, oh, I just don't have time after school, or I'm already doing VEX robotics after school. We really encourage chapters to embed TSA competitions into their classroom. So I'll give you an example. The engineering design competition at the high school level every year has a theme. So if you're teaching Project Lead the Way curriculum or Engineering by Design curriculum, instead of doing Project 3 in the Engineering 2 course, then you just implement the engineering design project with the theme for this year's competition. And that way students can start to see they could take this and actually compete with it. And like Jenna said with the kayaks, a lot of these can be really good recruiting tools for your program. Being an elective is getting your high schoolers into middle schools and taking that PVC kayak or taking the drone or taking their engineering design model and showing off to those middle school students. And middle school, same thing at the elementary level, fifth graders, recruiting fifth graders to come and want to be a part of your STEM program as well. If
I can add a quick tip, one of the things I used to do is use many of the activities. I would remove any of the TSA references to it, might copy and paste and make my own document, but use them as culminating events in lessons or units. And then when they're done and you're debriefing, mention that it's TSA, use it as a recruiting tool, but that's one way you also can use them in intracurricular or extracurricular ways, implementing co-curricular, implementing them into your classroom and into your lessons.
Yep. Yeah, and one of the most important pieces to this is a program of work. And so they have a template out there that it kind of helps you understand, this is what I need to be doing in the fall. This is what needs to happen in the winter. When do I need to fundraise, or how much money do I need to fundraise? And that's something that we're going to work on at summer conference this summer, if that happens. For the KYCTE summer conference, it's at the Galt House in July. Andy's going to be hosting a session called TSA 101. And we're going to work through what a program of work should look like. But it's basically a schedule and to help you kind of get organized. And that way you can start delegating some of the responsibilities to students in your chapter. Another thing I hear a lot is, I don't know how to elect officers. I don't know how to run an official TSA, bang a gavel parliamentary procedure meeting. And all of that can come in time. You don't have to have chapter officers your first year or really ever. You don't have to run an official meeting. You can just get students engaged in TSA kind of in your own way and utilizing your strengths. So don't just think, I can't start a club because I don't know how to elect officers, and obviously that's what Andy and I are here to help you when you decide you're ready to do those kinds of things as well.
Mark, we had a question about integrating with the PLTW engineering pathway and the competitions with those classes.
Okay. I'll send out as a follow-up. We've created TSA crosswalks. Of course, now that I say that, I won't be able to find them. Anyway, I'll send them out, but it'll show you if you're teaching IED, for example, these are the courses that are most closely aligned to IED, or if you're teaching the Project Lead the Way computer science course, these are the courses that most closely align to that. So that will definitely help. And I have that for the middle school as well. So if you're teaching Gateway, because Project Lead the Way is so popular, we tend to align a lot of our work to theirs, just because a vast majority of our engineering programs in the state are using their curriculum. So dues, we talked about dues a little bit. Most of the dues end up at the national office. Some of them trickle down to the state, but we don't, the dues are not what keeps us afloat. So we try to keep our state dues as low as we can. So there are 3 different CAP levels that you can see, and CAP just stands for Chapter Affiliation Program. So Red Cap is a flat fee of $150. And you can register up to 10 students. 100 of that is kept at the national level. 50 of that comes to the state, so we can buy supplies and things that we need to run the conferences. White Cap is, or at least used to be, the most popular way to affiliate in Kentucky. We actually have more schools blue capping now than ever. But White Cap, when you get 11 students or more, then you're paying per student. So you're paying $10 to the national office, $5 to the state. And that's not, you're not cutting 2 checks. All that money goes to the national office, and then they send us our dues allotment. Once you get up to a certain number, though, Blue Cap is by far the cheapest. So it's $500 total. But like I said, Grant County Middle School, for example, registered 750 students last year. So for them, they still paid $500, but there were 700 plus students that were TSA affiliated in their chapter. So really, when you get above 25 students, Blue Cap is the cheaper way to go. So if you have 50 kids that are interested, or 28 kids that are interested, it's going to save you money, and you can make your dues cheaper for your students. So instead of charging them 15, maybe it just your break even is now $12 or $8, depending on how many students you have interested. We obviously really encourage Blue Cap affiliation. It helps our membership grow. So we actually give a $100 discount on the state dues. Nationals will keep their $350, but we only ask for $50. So up until mid-October, which Chastity mentioned, we really encourage early affiliation so you can get access to the event guide for the year. So it's really only $400 instead of $500 up until mid-October. And as a thank you for registering and rostering all your students in your program into the TSA system, we also send each advisor a TSA polo shirt, like if you saw that I had on earlier. Sorry, I still have the shirt on. I just don't have my camera on. Yeah, and then I mentioned access to total TSA. So once you affiliation opens like Labor Day or the day after Labor Day. They want to make sure all school, or a majority of the schools across the nation, are in session, so nobody gets access to the competitive events before other schools aren't even in session. So after Labor Day, they open the affiliation window, and you can start registering and rostering your students. So you'll get access to membership materials. You can even print out like little membership cards for your students to carry. They have a lot of guidelines as far as how to promote and run and maintain your chapter. Great resources on how to fundraise and that sort of thing. And then obviously the competitive events guide is a big piece of that. And then you also get access to leadership lessons. So how do you incorporate leadership into your classroom is also a part of that TSA, the total TSA that you get access to. Some tips and resources, and then we will kind of open it up to questions, and I'll answer some of the questions that I know I missed. Ask for a mentor. So all of our teachers most of our advisors are more than willing to help a new advisor kind of understand the ins and outs. So we could definitely assign you with a mentor. Maybe it's somebody next door in a neighboring county, or in these virtual times, they could be anywhere really. Like I mentioned earlier, start small, pick 5 or 10 competitions. that relate to your pathway or your program, and just focus on those for the time being. When I send this PowerPoint out, you'll be able to click on this link, but they have what's called an advisor toolkit that you can get access to right now, even before you affiliate. And it helps you, it gives you a publicity article that you can use to promote with your local paper, talks about how to recruit students, talks about fundraising ideas. So that's a great resource that you can grab now before you even decide to join, so you can kind of look through it. I mentioned Perkins 5. So if you're not familiar, Perkins law changed, and now all the states are busy implementing the new federal guidelines for Perkins career and tech money, or the CTE money. This has not changed, but districts can use up to 35% of their Perkins money towards CTSOs. So if your CTE director says no, you can't do that, maybe they just don't want you to. So it's good to have knowledge of this, that you can use CTSO, or sorry, you can use Perkins money towards CTSOs to help pay for your travel, your sub, and your conference registration. So that's regional, state, and national. You cannot pay for student travel or expenses through Perkins. And this actually has changed. So districts can choose to allocate Perkins funding down to 6th grade now. So I need to change that in the slide, and I'll change that before I send it out. One new piece to Perkins 5 is there's a quality indicator now that says that you need to have a CTSO starting in 21-22. So they're kind of giving schools this year to kind of figure out what that looks like. By no means is TSA mandatory as far as your program area. If you already have Skills USA, for example, and you want to run some of their competitions. But like I said, ours is most closely aligned to the STEM pathways, so we would love to have you join TSA for sure. So funding is always a big question. So the TSA does have a kind of a new chapter, what they call Champion Fund. So you can actually apply for this. We had 2 schools this year receive money, and it helps you pay for up to 10 members. So they pay for your red cap. And I think they send you some resources as well. So they kind of help you get up and running your first year. So definitely look at that Champion Fund if you're interested in starting. Can't hurt. It's like a 1-page PDF that you fill out. Not a lot of work goes into it for sure. And then TSA's national website, you can see here our state website, and then we also have an app that's available in the Android and iOS store that we use a lot for, especially conferences. It's how we send out semifinalist lists and that sort of thing. We can push out notifications. So a couple of things I didn't answer. I know we're running short on time. Attire. So that was a question that was brought up. So at our regional conferences, we ask for business casual. So polo shirts, or something that an engineer would wear to work, basically. We do have some students that show up in t-shirts. We don't kick them out. We try to keep it pretty informal. At the state level, most of our competitions are business casual attire. Some of them do require, not very many, but actually I think just one really is official TSA dress, which is a blue blazer, a blue shirt, red tie. But the only one that requires that at the state level is chapter team. And that's students run a business meeting in front of the judges. So they're in official attire for that. We're very conscious about the cost of attire and buying uniforms for students. So we have really relaxed our dress code. Some students show up in official attire because their school has it, and that's great. Some students show up in a polo shirt or a blouse and a skirt, and that's great too. So we have a very easy to interpret guide that helps students understand, but by no means do you have to have like TSA logoed polo shirts or matching t-shirts, or we do have chapters that do that, and I think that's great. But as far as dress code, there's really nothing unless you want to do chapter team. When you get up to the national level, then you have to have the blue TSA shirt for a lot of the competitions, and sometimes official attire as well. All right, I'm gonna turn the recording off because I know that's awkward to talk. If you want to jump off because I know I'm over on time, you're more than welcome to, and we really appreciate you joining. If you want to stay on and chat, my calendar is pretty much free the rest of the afternoon. Andy and I can stay on. I'm not sure what Chastity and Jenna's schedule look like, but